So the world is descending into complete and utter chaos, one day at a time. My goodness, we have major news today that a massive nuclear drill that is going to involve 51 million people, all descending at the same time into one of 17,000 nuclear bunkers, is about to commence in the coming weeks ahead. And it wouldn't be so bad if the military of said country didn't decide to run a massive joint military exercise at the same time. Talk about a provocative move, if I ever heard one. Things could just pop off on August 23rd. Remember that the Ukrainians had telegraphed that they were going to do a massive drone strike in Moscow on the 23rd. Now this other country that we're going to talk about in just a moment is planning one of the biggest nuclear drills they've ever run on that day. And the president of that country is saying this one is going to be different. Guys, we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. What you're seeing behind me is something that we have been warning people about for some time. Apparently, according to the Kiev Post, this video is of Latvian soldiers doing some sort of military exercise. Apparently, they're moving their forces as well as other Baltic states and Poland towards the Belarusian border in response to threats from the private mercenary Wagner organization, as well as the nuclear weapons that Russia has positioned there. So this is just getting wildly out of control. We have so many points on the map to refer to today. Let's talk about the 5 major theaters of World War III that are simmering right now. We have, of course, the biggest one, and these are going to be in order of nuclear potential significance. Ukraine. We have the Korean Peninsula. We have the Taiwan-China issue. We now have, of course, the Strait of Hormuz, where the U.S. Marines could potentially be engaging the Iranians if they decide to commandeer more commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. And we also have Africa about to descend into total chaos. I mean, the war that started in Ukraine set all of this off. It was all a chain reaction. In fact, you could probably go all the way back to COVID, that it was the stress that COVID put on the supply chains, the economic stress that brought out all of these conflicts, which were just lying latent, dormant for the longest period of time. They just needed a trigger. And now that you've had the one in Ukraine, it's causing economic pressure on all of these other developing nations and militaries and everybody on the global economy. And that is bringing out the worst in everybody. Now let's talk firstly about this stuff going on in South Korea, because when I first looked at this story, I said, okay, it's another drill, another emergency exercise being run by the South Koreans. But this one is different. Get a load of this. 51 million strong nuclear exercise, nationwide civil defense drill is about to take place on August 23rd. They're going to practice evacuating the shelters underground in a 20-minute long exercise. Now just imagine 51 million people all getting the notification on their app at the same time telling them which of the 17,000 shelters that they're going to need to go to. Imagine the pandemonium that's going to ensue. Now, it's probably going to be a lot more orderly than it would be here, where currently in New York City right now, they're fighting over PlayStations. They're rioting over PlayStations right now in New York City. More on that later. But the Prime Minister is calling on South Koreans to take these drills seriously, indicating that something is different and that this hasn't always been the case. Now, I said before that Ukraine had telegraphed in a propaganda video that they made that on the 23rd of August, they were going to be sending a huge swarm of drones towards Moscow, or at least that was the subtext of that video. In fact, they put the actual date on the screen. I'm not saying these two things are connected. It's likely just a coincidence, but what worries me is what they go on to say in this article next. Instructions from the Interior Ministry said 17,000 shelters would be open nationwide. So they're going to get a message on their phone because, of course, no South Korean can remember where 17,000 shelters are. So when you get the signal, depending on where you are in the city, if you're away from your home, it's going to direct you to one of these shelters. So they probably want to run this test to know if the bombs are inbound, if North Korea blows its wad and dumps it on the South Koreans, what is the outcome going to be? How fast are people going to be able to mobilize into the nuclear shelters? Now, this is where it gets concerning. The launch of Hwasong-18 missiles was conducted at a grave period when the military security, that's the North Korean long-range intercontinental ballistic missile, was conducted at a grave period when the military security situation on the Korean Peninsula and in the region has reached a phase of nuclear crisis beyond the Cold War. Emphasis on beyond the Cold War. That means it's worse now than ever before. A statement in the North Korean state media said, of course, there is a U.S. nuclear submarine armed with nuclear missiles currently stationed in South Korea. Keep that in mind. Han, the South Korean Prime Minister, said the civil defense drill would be held in conjunction with a large-scale U.S.-South Korea military exercise that have drawn sharp criticism from Pyongyang in the past. So consider this for a second now. You're North Korea. You're paranoid as all hell. You've just struck a deal with the Russians. The Chinese are moving into position to blockade Taiwan as we speak. And you catch wind that the U.S. has just put a nuclear submarine in South Korea, and they're about to run on the same day a nuclear drill. They're gonna put all of their population, or all of the critical components of their population. There's certain things that are going to stay operational, but the majority of the population is descending into these bunkers, okay? And on the same day, they're going to do a joint military exercise. I mean, remember the old saying, there are no military exercises, only World War III surprises. If you don't think that on that day, North Korea is going to be hovering over the big red button with a hair trigger, my friends, I would just say keep your options open on August 23rd because shit could pop off on that day. Mistakes could be made. If you were ever going to presume that an invasion was imminent, this is the optimal situation for the United States and South Korea to stage an invasion. You get all of your population into the bunker, you warn them in advance, you do this joint military exercise at the same time. Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just saying that if you were going to do a massive invasion like this, this is how you would do it. So shit could pop off on the Korean Peninsula. Shit could pop off in Africa that we're going to talk about. Shit could pop off in the Strait of Hormuz. Understand and enjoy this time, this period of relative peace and civility in the world right now. Because things could just, once one of these dominoes falls, I do believe they're all going to fall in rapid succession. So let's talk about what's going on elsewhere in the world, shall we? So let's talk about what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, because this is significant as well, more significant than people realize. So the U.S. military is sending thousands of troops to the Persian Gulf. I'm not sure where they're going to be based out of. I haven't read all the details. They might just be on warships. So they're going to put all these troops in the Strait of Hormuz because Iran has been seizing commercial vessels. And if you're worried about the oil tankers that were sinking in the Black Sea and all the stuff going on there with Russia and Ukraine, we're going to talk about that in just a minute, okay? I got so much stuff in my brain, I can't possibly elucidate it all in a amount of time that's going to cater to everybody's attention span. But just let me get through this because all of this stuff is connected, guys. Now, the U.S. military is going to put troops on commercial vessels. They haven't done this ever. They didn't even do this during 1988 when they had what was called the Tanker War, which was the largest naval clash since World War II. And I believe this was with Iranians? I'm not a historian, but apparently this is something that has never happened before. This comes at a time when the Iranian weapons-grade nuclear enrichment program is basically reaching its pinnacle. They're reaching the point where they're going to be able to enrich uranium to weapons grade, which is not to say that they're going to make a nuke and use it right away. Some people ascribe religious motivations to the Iranians, saying that they're going to make these nukes and they're going to try to attack Israel, and that's their whole mission, to be self-deleting, in the sense that they know that they're going to get nuked by the US if and when they do that, or by Israel for that matter. I don't think that's a very strong motive for a country who, clearly has been around for thousands of years. I don't think that their goal is just complete and utter destruction. That wouldn't make much sense. However, if you talk to some religious fundamentalists on the alternate side, on the Israeli side, then they will say that no, that is actually their plan. So who knows what's going on. Anyways, what we do know is that this is going to put the United States and Iran very close in the Strait of Hormuz. If the Strait of Hormuz closes, 20% of crude oil gets shipped through here. If there's a 20% crude oil shortfall in the markets, that's going to lead to a doubling, if not tripling, to the price of oil. You may have some situation where you have like you had the grain corridor, you have the oil corridor, possibly for a short period of time. Is this why, or is this somehow related to Saudi Arabia's hosting of a so-called peace negotiation that's about to take place in the next couple days? Of course, Russia is not invited to those negotiations, and it's very unlikely that anything significant is going to come out of that. But all of these things are interconnected. Right now, I do believe that we've peaked. I believe that the market has peaked. I believe that the retraction now with the job numbers that just came out today, the realization that these fictitious job numbers that have been released, they're starting to reveal themselves for what they are. There's more part-time jobs than full-time jobs. The market is starting to struggle. The real market, not just the stock market. But all of these things are going to come together in and around the same time. Now, we have stuff that is going on in Russia as well. And it should be noted that all of these countries, think about it, in the last year, Iran, North Korea, you have the meeting with Shoigu in North Korea. You have the Iranians shipping Shahed drones. That's no longer up for debate. There was a time when, no, we're not doing it. We're not doing it all. Now they're building, factories in Russia and all this stuff. Or the Russians are, openly using Iranian military equipment. They're openly using North Korean military equipment. The Chinese allegedly have been supplying the Russians with parts that they need for some of their military equipment. So the lines are being drawn on all parts of the map, whether it's the Korean Peninsula, the Taiwan Strait that's currently getting ready to be encircled by the Chinese Navy. It would appear, judging by the amount of incursions into their airspace, which has drastically increased in the last few months. Now you have the proxy war that's about to be run on the African continent. The war has spread to Africa, it would appear. It doesn't appear like there's a lot of prospect for peace there. Now, really, all you need to know about what's going on in Africa, it's not a simple situation by any stretch of the means. But essentially, you have the Russians and the Chinese who have a very large influence. So if you look at this map, these are all countries that have military relationships with Russia in some way, shape, or form. Now, that's not saying a whole lot, because you could say that Turkey has a relationship with Russia because they have S-400 missile systems. So just because these countries have military connections with Russia doesn't necessarily mean they're hard and fast allies of Russia. For example, like Nigeria, who is probably going to be the one spearheading the operation that goes in to Niger to oust this government, that self-proclaimed government that has ousted the democratically elected government. Now, a note on that democratically elected government: these are the people, the majority of people, it would appear, in the streets in Niger, and they're all waving Russian flags. The majority, okay, we're talking about a democracy. Why are the majority of people in the streets? I've yet to see any counter protests. Okay, and I don't think that the government there has this huge stranglehold over the media like they do in some places like Ukraine. So why is it that you have the majority of people out there protesting for Russia. Yet you have the United States with their 1,000 soldiers and the French with their 15,000 soldiers essentially saying that we are going to stay there to secure our interests. You have the people saying we want you out, and you have the United States, essentially NATO, saying no, we're going to stay. That's called an occupation. Niger is under occupation, and the guy who fomented this coup is probably 110% correct. Now, where he's probably not correct is that the Russian alternative is necessarily going to be any better. But for them, they view Russia as the lesser of two evils. So he's right now calling on the Wagner organization to support them in their fight against the U.S. Inevitably, it's going to come down to they're going to have to push the U.S. and France out of these industrial facilities that I'm presuming that's the only reason why the French and the U.S. is there, is to protect the uranium, protect the natural gas pipeline that they're constructing, protect all the resources. Just going to be Iraq all over again, essentially. So that's what's going on. It would appear that the people in Niger, they don't want the West there in their country anymore. So you're having a proxy war emerge, and you have the ECOWAS, who's largely aligned with the West. Are they all puppet dictators? I don't know. I've made that comment in passing in the past, but I don't know enough to know about the situation, what their support levels are, what their popularity levels are in their respective countries. But it does appear that the most simplest way to understand this is that there's a war for African resources between European and Western countries, if you will. So the Russians on the one hand, and the Chinese and the West on the other. And the Africans right now, half of them want to ally with the East, and half perhaps want to ally with the West. And so you're going to see a rerun of World War II, essentially how it played out in Africa then, where you're going to have certain factions of African governments wanting to ally more with the East and others wanting to ally more with the West. So, I mean, it's becoming crystal clear what is exactly going on in the world is that all the lines are being drawn in the sand. East and West is becoming much more clear, especially as these countries begin to move their soldiers into the borders or towards the borders of respective countries that they're going to be up against. Now, in terms of what's going on in Belarus, according to the Kiev Post, so take it with a grain of salt, Russia is planning a false flag attack at a Belarusian oil refinery. So the Russians are claiming that, the Ukrainians are claiming that Russia is going to be either blow up this massive facility, and I'll show you exactly where it is. It's one that they would view as strategic because it's such a large oil refinery right around here. And I'm not sure what the oblast is called. I don't have the titles on for the actual region or the oblast. But anyways, you can go and look up the story. It's a large oil refinery. The Ukrainians are saying that the Russians are about to blow it up, or parts of it up, because I'm sure they're not going to be able to blow all of it up, but it's going to be a spectacle, and they're going to blame Ukrainian saboteurs in an attempt to justify some sort of Belarusian involvement in the Ukrainian conflict. Could this be why the Latvians and the Baltic states and the Poles are starting to move more troops towards the border? Just recently, there was a bit of an incident where it was alleged that 2 Belarusian helicopters crossed the border into Poland. Now, Belarus denies this. Poland confirms this, according to their sources, and they're using it as justification to move more troops in that direction, and they've called for the use of force should anything like this happen again. So their military is on a high state of alert, as are the Latvians. Of course, you have the Wagner group doing something around there. They're digging all kinds of trenches. Look, if you're in denial about where this is going, and if you just think, oh, this is all going to blow over, then please provide me and tell me in the comment section below how you can come to that conclusion. possibly, in light of everything that I've just told you, we were entering a period of economic contraction. The Europeans understand that if they cannot procure African resources on the cheap as they have, bleeding the African continent dry, giving them only 5% of the take on these resources as they have been, as Evgeny Prigozhin eloquently articulated in a post that he made the other day, where he basically talked about how, yeah, the African countries are getting ripped off by the West, and well, we're probably ripping them off too. We're still giving them a better deal. But all these things are connected. So if the West cannot win a war of attrition between Russia and Ukraine, and they know that they are now dependent on these cheap resources from Africa, well, of course, Russia is going to try to stir up unrest in Africa in an attempt to cut their strategic supply lines from Africa. Okay, there's this massive gas pipeline. The situation in Nigeria is not stabilized according to the standards of the West. There will be nothing for the Trans-Saharan gas pipeline, which according to the contractor's plans was supposed to supply the EU countries with 30 billion cubic meters of Nigerian gas annually. That's why the Nigerians care. That's why they are going to spearhead this whole operation. Nigeria is one of the largest African economies. It is soon to be the third most populous country in the world. I think they're already over 200 million. They're rapidly catching up to the United States, who is not having babies anymore. They're just riding over PlayStations. And this is the situation we're in. So you see how all these things are connected. I can only imagine a situation right now. I cannot, this just seems like a situation that cannot be resolved other than something emerging from the ashes after everything has been blown to smithereens. You have wars simmering on every single possible front, something you could not have said last year. Think about where we were last January. Well, I was in a car, I was talking about how a war with Russia and Ukraine was coming, but let's go back further. Let's go to 2021 in December. Around that time, there was some talk about geopolitics, but it was mostly centered around the pandemic at that time. Okay, most people were not concerned. There was some concerns about climate issues, but there was not this massive move to blockade Taiwan. There was not this massive rhetoric on the Korean Peninsula. There was not, the United States, which was on the brink of civil war. We had yet to see, I guess we had seen January 6th. You did not see this stuff in Africa. Nobody was talking about that at all. There was a few people talking about what was going on in Ukraine, but nothing like we're seeing now. And you didn't even see this stuff going on with Iran. Yeah, you had the execution of Soleimani, but that had kind of fizzled out throughout the pandemic and was overshadowed by that. But everything that is happening right now, I mean, if you don't know, if you can't see the writing on the wall with respect to what's coming, and you're still dumping money into the markets, into like crypto and all this stuff, then I just don't know at this point. I really just don't know. The Baltic nations are not only expelling Russian diplomats and Russians, as is the case in Latvia, but they're also going to disconnect from the Russian power grid. So a lot of Baltic states are still hardwired to the power grid. So how are they going to disconnect from the power grid when Ukraine is not putting out power anymore, when they can't get any more natural gas from Russia, and now the natural gas and resources from Africa, that whole pipeline is going to be compromised, okay? So, and then you also have this issue with Belarus. If they're, right now, they're in the process of, it would appear, in Ukraine, I should say, not Belarus, targeting commercial vessels. So that's where that's where it's come to. So what they're doing now, if you've probably heard, there was a attack on the Northern Fleet warship of Russia by the Ukrainians, and there's some video footage of this. I'm not sure if it's going to sink. It looks like it might be another Moskva situation. Like, a situation doesn't look good. I mean, that thing looks like it's going to sink. It's on its side. Now, what also happened just before I made this video is that the Ukrainians targeted they targeted an oil tanker. I don't have any images of it, but they targeted an oil tanker. They thought they had targeted the Crimean Bridge, but it was actually an oil tanker in this region. So now they're targeting oil tankers, which is going to be a huge environmental disaster. Understandingly, they're targeting commercial infrastructure, but, you know, is Greta going to say something about this? Is Greenpeace going to be on the case? Is the World Economic Forum going to be talking about how much of an environmental issue it is now that they're targeting oil tankers? Probably not. It's probably just going to be completely ignored by the media, but that's the situation we're entering with respect to that situation. We also have, I think I talked about China and Taiwan the other day. Basically, China has been doing more and more incursions in and around Taiwan, and they're essentially in a position right now to do the blockade, as far as I know, to do a blockade, not an invasion. So what they're going to do is they're going to set their warships up, and they're going to prevent anything from coming into Taiwan. The U.S. is going to try to break that blockade, and that's when the war is going to start, okay? What else do we got going on in the world? We got the same old economic stuff. The food prices are rising once again for the first time in over a year. And we also have people rioting over PlayStations in the good old US of A. This is why I don't put any faith in the government, much less the people who are currently dependent on it to behave when the shizzy hits the fizzy. So keep on prepping, folks. That's about all I got for you today, man. Things are heating up. I seen a pretty interesting infographic that was released the other day. It was kind of funny. Let's watch it from the start. This is Russia's aggressive infringement on the NATO alliance. Okay, we're going to see it any time now. We're going to see Russia's aggression. Yeah, see, NATO is expanding. We're in 1996, 1997. Let's speed this up a little bit because we don't have all day. 2001, 2005, NATO keeps expanding. Russia's going to attack any minute now. This aggression is going to come any minute. 7 to 18, 19. Oh, I guess they missed Crimea. Oh, there we go. So Russia attack. You see? It's all Russia's fault. They started it. You guys know I'm not a big Russia bro. I'm not some Russian apologist or Russian sympathizer. I try to view both sides. This is a Russian factory showing off their military industry is very vital right now, apparently. And they're building tanks here. They're building the tank tracks, I believe. This is a tank factory. So there doesn't appear to be any shortage of workers there. You know, their military is now fully reaping the benefits of a war-style economy. And they're just gaining so much experience in high-intensity combat that and we're riding over PlayStations. It doesn't look good. The outlook is quite bleak. So let's just hope that our intelligence agencies have been able to learn as much as we could through the Ukrainian sacrifice to get us all ready. Now, the Ukrainians, I guess I haven't talked about this much. Allegedly, according to Zelensky, he's saying that the 10th Corps of the 10th Army Corps of Ukraine, which is comprised of probably 30,000 to 50,000 men, is about to embark on the second stage of the counter-offensive in the Zaporozhye direction, and they are citing some success on breaking the first line of defense. There are several lines of defense that the Russians have in this region. So I guess they're hoping that if they can get through one line of defense, like the first line, then the successive lines will buckle easier. Because according to the Russians, if you believe some of the wild numbers that they're putting out, the Ukrainians have lost like 40,000 guys in the last couple of months, like whole army corps, 2 divisions. They've lost thousands of tanks and armored personnel carriers and all the rest. And I'm not saying those numbers are accurate. I'm just saying that's what people are saying. Now, the Russians have yet to make any major offensive plays, which tells me that they're obviously not in a place where they're ready to do this invasion of Ukraine yet, at least finish off the annexed territories and take Kharkov and Odessa yet. Otherwise, they would have already. So some people are saying, oh yeah, this war is going to be over by summer. I don't even see how you could say something like that. The Ukrainian military is still far too formidable to fold, and even if the Ukrainian conflict, if it ends, I don't just see how it ends all of a sudden. That just makes no sense to me, because neither side will accept a peace treaty. Russia is not going to be able to take Odessa by the end of summer, so the war is not ending by the end of summer. So whoever's saying that is out to lunch, in my personal opinion, or is just being a little bit melodramatic with things. But yeah, they're saying that the Ukrainian military is still getting ready to do the offensive. So, I mean, either somebody's delusional or maybe it was a bit of a ruse. And don't worry, because we're going to stay informed, because the new Ukrainian spokesperson for the SBU, Sandra Aston-Cirilio, the one who told us the other day that they caught Gonzalo Lira at the border, they have a new transgendered spokesperson. So to speak to us all like we're children, guys, this is clown world, man. This is clown world. Oh, man, what's going on? What the Okay, hang on a sec. I want to show you guys something. I want to show you guys, because this almost tells me we're living in a simulation here. Check this out. Apparently, is it the James Webb telescope picked this up today. This is not, this is real, what I'm about to show you. This is not something that is, if I can actually pull up the picture here. Let me see if I can just go like this. Okay, this is real. They found an image of a question mark. Now, if I was trolling my simulacrums in the artificial metaverse that I created, that would be us, I would put a question mark in the galaxy. Now, they're saying that this is some weird anomaly. It's a combination of galaxies, so there's one galaxy maybe forming or something like that. But, at this point in time, that's perfect. I mean, this is the perfect image. As an agnostic, I think I'm going to get this framed on my wall. I know there's some of you guys who are really trying to convert me before the end of the world happens. But just keep posting those, those pro-Christian messages, and maybe you'll get me one of these days, but it's doubtful. But all I'm saying is don't give up. Don't give up on me, folks. I know there's some of you who are just waiting for the day that I come out and I say, praise the Lord. I don't think it's going to happen, because I'm a scientist. I'm an empiricist at heart. You guys let me know what you think this means. Is this just the government messing with us? Is this the Matrix? Is this proof that the earth is flat? I know I got a few of you out there that I haven't purged yet. Let me know in the comments section below. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Don't forget to gear up. CanadianPreparedness.com.